Hey guys, tonight we're not heading back to the Middle Ages or the Roman baths. We're wandering somewhere far more dangerous, far more fluorescent, and somehow far more tragic. The modern American hardware store. Specifically, the orange-tinted temple of DIY despair, Home Depot. And tonight, we're talking about its darkest secret. No, not the mysterious fate of the last employee who asked for a raise, the deadly paint huffing epidemic. Before we dive nose first into this tale of chemical chaos, go ahead and hit that like button, but only if you actually enjoy history mixed with a mild existential crisis. Subscribe if you want more stories about how humans keep accidentally inventing new ways to almost die. And a quick thank you to everyone who suggested this topic. You've got an impeccable sense for strange history. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, it's always 2:17 AM when people find these videos. Now dim the lights, put your fan on low for that cozy background hum, maybe even light a candle. Something safe, something non-toxic. Because tonight's story smells faintly of solvents, corporate panic, and the kind of bad decisions that start with the words, "How bad could it be?" Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wandered into a hardware store at 10 PM and wondered, who are these people buying 12 cans of metallic silver spray paint? Why is that one teenager comparing the warning labels like he's choosing a fine wine? What does it actually feel like to work in that aisle? The one that smells like new car interior and existential dread. Could you spend 8 hours surrounded by fumes and fluorescent light, pretending not to notice that someone's art project is a little too intense? Would you survive a shift under the hum of ballasts and the haunting melody of classic rock for contractors radio? Could you tell the difference between a customer who's remodeling their bathroom and one who's about to start a public health crisis in the parking lot? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the paint aisle of a suburban Home Depot circa 2007. Your orange apron is wrinkled, your name tag is crooked, and your entire life now smells faintly of summer meadow satin. The customers are circling, the cans are rattling, and you're about to discover just how weird retail can get when public safety and capitalism share a break room. You start your shift before sunrise. The parking lot is an ocean of orange carts and bad decisions. This smell hits you first, that faint cocktail of dust, fertilizer, and despair. Your manager, a man powered entirely by caffeine and compliance, claps you on the shoulder. "Big day," he says. He always says that. You clock in, tie your apron, and try not to think about how much of your soul now belongs to aisle 14. The world inside the store feels half awake, like a mall after the apocalypse. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, humming a pitch only anxious people can hear. Somewhere, a pallet jack groans, echoing down the concrete canyon of lumber and plumbing. The air conditioning is set to Arctic tundra, because corporate believes in keeping employees alert through mild hypothermia. You sip your coffee, burnt, bitter, and approximately the temperature of lava, and join the slow-moving parade of orange aprons clocking in one by one. You pass the break room, where motivational posters insist that teamwork makes the dream work. You've been here long enough to know the dream in question is retirement. Someone has taped a sad doodle of a skeleton under the slogan. You smile faintly, not because it's funny, but because it's true. Then comes the morning meeting, or as management calls it, the pre-shift pep rally. The manager reads from a laminated card of safety reminders, his voice flat, as if his soul clocked out sometime in 2008. "Remember, team," he says, "safety starts with you." He gestures vaguely at a poster showing a cartoon employee giving a thumbs up next to a fire extinguisher. No one listens. You're all too busy wondering if the coffee maker in the break room ever gets cleaned, or if it's now sentient. After the speech, everyone disperses to their departments like obedient ants returning to the colony. You make your way to paint, your kingdom of fumes and frustration. The smell gets stronger with every step, the heavy sweetness of latex, the metallic sting of aerosol, the ghost of 50,000 bad home projects. It's comforting, in a weird, toxic way. You find your tinting machine humming softly in the corner, like a cat with asthma. There's something oddly peaceful about this early hour. The customers haven't arrived yet, and for a few fleeting minutes the store is yours. You take inventory, wiping down shelves, restocking sample cards, pretending to be productive. The silence is only broken by the faint rattle of a spray can somewhere deep in the aisle. You freeze. Probably just settling stock, you tell yourself. Probably. Your first customer of the day appears right on schedule, an older man wearing flip-flops and the confidence of someone who's definitely going to spill primer on himself later. He slaps a crumpled note on the counter. "Need this colour," he grunts. You look at the paper. It says kinda blue, but not sad. You smile politely, because this is your life now. As the morning drags on, more customers filter in. Couples arguing about off-white shades, contractors complaining about prices, the occasional wandering soul who just came in for the air conditioning. You nod, mix, and shake. The tinting machine vibrates with the force of a small earthquake, and you realise that if it ever developed sentience, it would probably beg for release. By mid-morning, the intercom crackles. Clean up in aisle 6. You glance at the clock, only 10 a.m. Somehow time moves slower under fluorescent light. You sneak a sip of cold coffee, which now tastes faintly like despair and latex, and wonder if there's still any joy left in the world. A coworker passes by and mutters, "Think we'll make it through another day?" You shrug. We always do. And somehow you mean it. Because despite the absurdity, the fumes, the fake cheer, the endless parade of customers who think matte is a colour, there's a rhythm here. You've learned to live inside it. By noon, the sun outside is blazing, but inside it's still that same humming, artificial dawn. You peel off one glove to scratch your wrist, and realise your hands smell permanently of acrylic and sanitizer. You've been here for years, and you're starting to think your bloodstream might just be 10% primer at this point. When your manager swings by again, he smiles that managerial smile, the one that never reaches the eyes. "How's it going in paint?" he asks. You give the standard answer, living the dream. He nods approvingly, unaware that you mean it in the existential sense. The morning haze finally starts to lift around lunchtime. The world outside the glass doors looks bright and unreal. You stand there for a moment, blinking at the sunlight like a cave creature. Then you turn back toward the paint aisle, take a deep breath of solvent-flavoured air, and step back into your domain. Another day in paradise, or at least in aisle 14. The paint aisle stretches out before you like a rainbow of bad choices. Every can is a different warning label. Every customer is a test of patience. The tint machine hums ominously, like it knows it's going to jam today. The air smells like industrial fruit and denial. Somewhere behind you, a radio plays the same Leonard Skynerd song it's been playing since 1997. You stand there, surrounded by colour. So much colour. Shades of blue that all look the same but are apparently emotionally distinct, according to the marketing labels: Whispering Sky, Tidal Memory, Corporate Regret. Each one promises transformation, a new beginning, a fresh start. In reality, they're just chemical promises waiting to chip, peel, or ruin someone's marriage during a weekend remodel. The first customer of the day approaches cautiously, like you're a wild animal. "I need something white," they say, but not too white. You stare back, nodding sagely, because this conversation has no logical endpoint. You show them options: eggshell, ivory, cloud, bone, snow, linen, arctic frost. They squint. They say, "I think I want something warmer." You resist the urge to tell them that warmth is an illusion created by incandescent lighting and misplaced optimism. You fire up the tinting machine. It rumbles like an old washing machine full of coins. You pour, mix, and seal, praying to the gods of viscosity that it won't splatter your apron again. The machine coughs once, then begins to spin violently, shaking the counter like it's auditioning for an exorcism. You smile at the customer as if this is all part of the process. "She's just waking up," you say. patting it like a loyal but deranged pet. By mid-morning the parade begins. The couples, the contractors, the DIY visionaries. Each one brings chaos in a slightly different shade. A young couple argues quietly in front of you. "I told you sage green was calming. It's mould, Karen. It looks like mould." You lean on the counter, pretending not to hear, but you've become a silent marriage counsellor, referee and colour therapist all rolled into one. Then there's the regulars. The retired painter who insists on telling you that they don't make brushes like they used to. The woman who's repainting her kitchen for the 6th time this year. The local artist who insists every colour should be mixed by feel, not formula. You nod, smile and scan their purchases, silently wondering if you could also be mixed by feel and just disappear into the paint shaker. Somewhere down the aisle, a can falls with a metallic thunk. You flinch. Every paint associate develops a sixth sense for potential disasters. You rush over to find a small puddle of cinnamon sunset spreading across the floor. It looks exactly like a crime scene. You grab the mop, sighing as the smell of latex and disappointment fills the air. The cleanup process is slow, methodical, and deeply humiliating. But at least it's quiet, which counts as peace in retail. By noon, your fingers are tacky with dried paint, your head buzzes from fumes, and you've answered the same question 14 times. Will this colour dry darker? You always give the same answer. It depends on the lighting. You have no idea if that's true, but it sounds comforting, and sometimes that's all people need. You take a break near the mixing counter, watching the fluorescent light flicker rhythmically. The sound of rattling cans fills the background, a mechanical heartbeat for your new reality. You think about your life before this. College classes, ambitions, the idea that meaningful work existed somewhere. Now you're here, helping people pick between antique pearl and almost antique pearl. And weirdly, it's not the worst thing in the world. Because in this strange, colour-coded purgatory, there's a certain calm. The steady rhythm of the tinting machine, the simple satisfaction of a perfectly sealed can, the tiny victories when a customer leaves smiling instead of sighing. It's absurd, it's monotonous, and it's oddly human. At the end of your shift, you wipe down the counter and look out over your kingdom. Rows upon rows of sealed cans gleam under harsh light. Silent, waiting, patient. You breathe in the scent of chemicals and irony. It's not heaven. It's not hell. It's aisle 14, the place where people come to fix what's broken, or at least paint over it. And you're the gatekeeper, the guardian of gloss, the prophet of primer, the reluctant hero of Home Depot. Before they let you near the spray paints, corporate insists on safety training. A grainy VHS video from 1998 explains that solvents are your friends, if treated responsibly. You sign a waiver you didn't read. The narrator's cheerful voice assures you that workplace safety is everyone's responsibility. You suspect it's mostly yours. The video plays in a back room that smells faintly of coffee and despair. The TV rests on a rolling cart older than some of your co-workers, its static-filled screen flickering like an omen. On the table beside you sits a stack of stapled safety manuals, the kind printed in black and white, and written in a tone that suggests deep distrust of the human species. You flip through one idly. Every page is a new way to die slowly. Do not inhale fumes. Do not operate machinery while emotional. Do not lick unknown substances. It's both helpful and wildly unhelpful at the same time. A man in the video, let's call him Bob, wears khakis, a tucked-in polo, and the confidence of someone who's never spilled lacquer thinner on his own shoe. He demonstrates proper handling techniques with exaggerated enthusiasm. Remember, Bob chirps, when dealing with volatile chemicals, ventilation is your best friend. You glance at the single dusty ceiling vent in the real-world paint department and feel a quiet, existential laugh forming deep in your chest. Midway through the training, Bob introduces his assistant, a woman named Cheryl, who smiles like she's been trapped in this tape since the Clinton administration. Cheryl stands in front of a shelf labelled aerosols and proceeds to read the safety warnings aloud. Her tone suggests she's auditioning for an infomercial about common sense. "Always wear gloves," she says brightly, as the camera pans dramatically to a close-up of her hands. You look down at your own hands, bare, already stained with last week's primer, and realise you failed before even beginning. Then comes the part every employee remembers, the chemical hazard section. Bob's voice drops to a serious tone, the music shifts to minor key, and the footage suddenly cuts to a reenactment. A poor actor, labelled Tom, stands in a cloud of imaginary fumes, coughing dramatically. The narration warns that inhaling solvents can cause dizziness, nausea, and, quote, reduced ability to make sound decisions. You mutter under your breath, so basically, every customer I've ever met. After the video ends, the manager hands you a multiple-choice quiz that looks like it was photocopied during the Carter administration. One of the questions reads, Q3. If a coworker begins to experience dizziness while using a solvent-based product, what should you do? A. Laugh. B. Open a window. C. Alert a supervisor and follow store policy. You circle C, because even though A feels honest, you'd rather not get fired during orientation. The manager collects your papers with a sigh of relief. "Congrats," he says. "You're certified for chemical handling." It sounds impressive until you realise all it really means is that if something explodes, you're the first one expected to know why. Afterward, he leads you on a safety tour. You pass the fire extinguishers, one every 75 feet, the eyewash station that looks like it hasn't seen water since Y2K, and a display of masks that corporate insists are optional but encouraged. You nod dutifully, pocketing the complimentary earplugs like relics from a doomed civilization. As you step back into the main store, you feel the shift immediately. The real world hums louder, the air thicker with that unmistakable cocktail of sawdust, sweat, and solvent. You've been trained now, which apparently means you've been made aware of all the ways you can die, and none of the ways to prevent it. A customer waves from the distance, already holding 2 spray cans and no sense of fear. You smile politely and think, Bob would be disappointed in us both. The day moves on, the warnings fade into background noise, and the paint aisle calls your name. Somewhere in the distance, the safety poster flaps slightly in the air conditioning, its faded slogan barely legible. Be safe, be smart, be proud. You adjust your apron, inhale the faint scent of acrylic doom, and mutter the unspoken 4th rule under your breath. Be realistic. After a week, you start recognizing faces. There's the retired guy who repaints birdhouses, the woman who smells faintly of varnish and paranoia. And then there's the quiet ones, the ones who buy too many aerosols and never look you in the eye. You try not to judge. You definitely judge. Every job has its cast of recurring characters, but the paint aisle is its own small universe, equal parts art supply store, confession booth, and hazard zone. The retired man is usually first. He arrives early, long before the caffeine has settled in your bloodstream, clutching a list scrawled in handwriting that looks like it survived 3 generations of photocopying. He always buys the same things, a quart of rustic walnut, 2 brushes, and a roll of painter's tape. He tells you about his birdhouses, how each one has a theme. One week it's nautical, the next it's patriotic, and once, disturbingly, romantic. You nod politely, imagining a sparrow flying into something that smells faintly of regret and rose-coloured latex. Then there's Marianne. No one calls her that, but you decided she looks like one. She appears mid-morning, wrapped in 3 layers of sweaters regardless of season, carrying the faint perfume of turpentine and conspiracy. She leans in too close when she talks. "You know," she whispers, "they're watering down the paint now." You assure her that, no, the paint is not part of a shadow government initiative. She narrows her eyes. That's what they'd want you to say. She buys 6 quarts of high-gloss white and leaves muttering something about her landlord and the walls listening. You put her on the mental list titled, mild threats to sanity but still polite. By afternoon, the contractors arrive, the loud ones. They smell like dust, caffeine and deadlines. They slap the counter, toss crumpled invoices and shout orders like they're calling in an airstrike. You admire their confidence. No hesitation, no doubt. Just gallons of beige with names like Desert Silence or Corporate Porridge. You mix the paint as fast as you can while they debate whether eggshell or satin will hide the sins of a poorly sanded drywall job. And then come the quiet ones. They're the reason you've learned to tell the difference between art student broke and this person might pass out in the parking lot. They shuffle in near closing time, hood up, sleeves too long, eyes distant. They don't ask for help. They know where everything is, especially the cheap aerosols. You recognise the way their hands tremble slightly as they pick up the cans, the way they glance at the security camera before turning away. Corporate tells you not to profile customers, but the truth is you can smell it. The sweet, artificial bite of propellant and something darker underneath. You ask if they need assistance. Sometimes they smile, sometimes they bolt, and sometimes they just stand there for a moment too long, staring at the colours like the rainbow itself betrayed them. You ring up their purchase, your voice calm, steady. You bag the cans carefully because there's no safe way to do this job when you know what's happening but can't say it out loud. By evening, the store feels like a carousel of human oddities, looping endlessly. Birdhouse man, conspiracy lady, chaos contractors, and the quiet ghosts who hover between customer and concern. You start to understand that the paint aisle isn't just about colour, it's about stories, and not all of them end well. All. Sometimes you linger after closing, wiping down the counter and thinking about the day's faces. You wonder what drives people here. Boredom, art, anxiety, or something they can't name. You've begun to notice how often paint is really just a disguise. People come in claiming they're fixing up a room, but what they're really fixing is something invisible. A breakup, a memory, a sense of control. Paint can cover a lot of things, but not everything. You lock up for the night, pocketing the store keys like talismans. The radio still hums softly over the empty aisles, playing another recycled classic rock song. As you walk past the shelves, rows of cans gleaming under fluorescent light, you think about all the people who'll come back tomorrow, each one trying to colour over the same blank wall of their lives. In the end, the regulars remind you of something uncomfortable. Everyone's just trying to change their surroundings a little, hoping it'll make the inside of their head quieter. Some of them use brushes, some use spray cans, and some just come to aisle 14 again and again hoping you'll remember their name. It's hard to describe the exact smell of spray paint to someone who's never lived with it. Sweet, metallic, chemical, like a toxic fruit smoothie. You can tell when someone's been overusing it. The air grows thick, the walls seem to hum, and your headache feels vaguely existential. You first notice it on a slow Tuesday. The store is half empty, the overhead lights buzzing like hornets, and somewhere in aisle 14 there's a faint sweetness cutting through the usual scent of sawdust and latex. At first, you think it's just another customer testing a can too close to the shelf. But then you realise it's heavier. It lingers. It seeps into the air like an invisible fog. Your body reacts before your brain does. The back of your throat feels fuzzy, your eyes sting a little, and you start to feel off. Not dizzy exactly. More like you're one deep inhale away from hearing colours. You glance around. No one's there. Just rows and rows of paint cans, all gleaming innocently under the sterile light, like soldiers pretending they've done nothing wrong. You step closer to the source, following the smell like a bloodhound with poor self-preservation instincts. The scent grows sharper, sweeter, more insistent. Then you see it. A half-used can sitting crooked on the shelf, nozzle still glistening. Someone's been here, and recently. You check the cameras later and confirm it. A blurry figure in a hoodie, ducking low, spraying just enough to feel something before slipping out. This is the moment you realise the paint aisle has its own weather system. It doesn't matter how many air filters corporate installs, or how often they tell you ventilation is key. The fumes hang in the air like gossip, impossible to contain, impossible to forget. You've started carrying mints just to mask the taste of chemicals that cling to the back of your tongue long after your shift ends. The smell becomes a warning, a code only the employees understand. When it's faint, you ignore it. When it's strong, everyone subtly drifts toward other departments. Need a hand in garden, someone might ask, already halfway out the door. No one ever says the word huffing. They say incident or situation or, in the most corporate way possible, unsanctioned aerosol activity. But you can always tell. The smell of trouble doesn't just fill the air, it changes the energy. The whole aisle feels charged, tense, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The regulars get quiet. The cashiers glance toward paint more often than usual. Even the store manager, who's allergic to responsibility, suddenly finds reasons to check on safety compliance. You stand behind the counter, trying to look calm while your heart pounds a steady rhythm of please, not again. When it's over, when the scent finally fades, when the air settles back into its usual mix of latex and disappointment, you're left with the aftermath. A few cans go missing, a few more get written off as damaged inventory. You file a report you know no one will read, filling in boxes labelled nature of incident and preventative measures. You check monitor customer behaviour because there isn't an option for I'm just doing my best here. Later, when you clock out and sit in your car, the smell is still there. It's clinging to your clothes, your hair, even your skin. You drive home with the windows down, hoping the night air will scrub it away. It doesn't. You shower twice, eat something bland, lie down, and still, as you drift towards sleep, there it is. That faint sweetness, the ghost of something chemical, humming in the corners of your mind. You realise then that the paint aisle has marked you. You'll smell that mix of aerosol and anxiety for years to come, in parking garages, art classrooms, even the perfume counter at the mall. It's the scent of vigilance, of quiet dread, of knowing that beneath the gloss and colour there's a darkness no amount of primer can cover. And in the morning, when you walk back through those sliding doors, you'll catch that faint sweetness again, and your body will tense, ready. Because the truth is, once you've worked in the paint aisle long enough, you stop asking if trouble's coming back. You just start wondering when. They travel in packs, giggling, pretending to care about art projects. They whisper near the clearance rack, grab the cheapest cans, and vanish before you can blink. Sometimes you find their handiwork later, neon ghosts on the dumpster wall. You wish they'd stuck to Minecraft. They arrive like migrating birds, loud, chaotic, and completely unaware that you've seen their kind 1,000 times before. Hoodies up, headphones dangling, energy drink cans in hand, they travel in loose formation, orbiting one another as if drawn by gravity and bad ideas. You can spot them before they speak. They move differently, that twitchy mix of boredom and potential felony. "Hey man," one says, sidling up to the counter, voice cracking under the weight of overconfidence. "Do you have a chrome paint?" You nod, and their friends snicker behind him, pretending to browse. "What's it for?" you ask casually, because you already know the answer. School project," he says. You raise an eyebrow. It's July. They head for the spray paint aisle like it's sacred ground. You follow at a discreet distance, watching them whisper and point at labels. They pick up a can, shake it once, listening to the rattle with reverence. It's a ritual, the rattle test. Then they pretend to debate between silver and gold, like they're redecorating Versailles. You've learned to read the signs, the way they linger too long near the cheapest brands, the way they glance up at the cameras, the way one keeps lookout while another palms a can. The smell that sometimes follows isn't subtle, that sweet, sharp tang of aerosol misuse. You try to intervene gently, the way you'd approach a feral raccoon. "Need any help with your project?" you ask. They freeze, mutter a nah, and scatter like pigeons. Later, you find the evidence. The dumpster wall, freshly tagged in dripping neon pink, spelling out something that looks like the word vibe but might also just be abstract rebellion. You sigh, grab a can of industrial cleaner and start scrubbing. The paint smears into a muddy bruise on the metal, A perfect metaphor for your life choices. Sometimes, though, you catch them before the mischief. One day, a nervous kid lingers alone by the shelf. He's maybe 15, pale, clutching a can like it's a ticket to another world. You strike up a conversation. He tells you he's doing art, but there's a quiver in his voice that doesn't sound creative. It sounds like escape. You talk to him about colour theory, about painting murals instead of dumpsters, about using brushes instead of lungs. He nods. You never see him again, and you don't know if that's a good sign. Corporate tells you to stay vigilant, but vigilance is hard when you're also the cashier, colour mixer, and emotional support worker for everyone who walks through those doors. You start to notice patterns, the surge right after school lets out, the lull during finals week, the wave that comes back in summer. You learn the slang, the distractions, the half-baked lies about skate park decorations. You pretend not to know that they aren't decorating anything. What no one mentions in training is the quiet dread that comes after they leave. You stand in the aisle, air still humming with the smell of propellant, wondering which of those kids won't come back, not because they're grounded, but because their next experiment goes wrong. You fill out the incident log again, ticking the box for suspected misuse, though the form feels more like a confession than documentation. The worst part is how ordinary it all becomes. You stop feeling angry. You just feel tired of watching potential dissolve in aerosol mist, tired of the weird fragility of youth, tired of being the only adult standing between bad decisions and something irreversible. When the store closes, you step outside into the cooling night air. The parking lot is quiet, but the faint smell of paint still hangs around the dumpster. The moonlight hits the graffiti and makes it shimmer faintly, almost beautiful. A broken kind of beauty, the kind only teenagers could create without meaning to. You stare at it for a moment, sigh, and lock the door behind you. Tomorrow they'll be back. Different faces, same story, the same laughter, the same smell, the same restless urge to make their mark on something, anything. Even if it disappears by morning, it starts like any other day. Then a loud clatter, a shout, and the unmistakable hiss of an aerosol can rolling across the floor. You turn the corner and someone's down. Time slows. The smell is sharp. Someone calls 911. You try to remember the CPR video from training, but all you can think is, this was aisle 14. It's strange how ordinary the day was up until that moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed, the tint machine groaned, and the radio mumbled something about weekend sales. You were halfway through explaining to a customer why primer is not a personality when you heard it. That metallic clang that sends a jolt straight through your spine. You know that sound, spray can on concrete. A second later, someone screams. You drop the paint chip book and start running, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. As you round the corner, the world shrinks to a single frame. A person, young, slumped against the base of the shelving, their hand still half clutching a can of metallic silver. The hiss fades, replaced by a heavy chemical sweetness that fills your nose and your chest, until you feel lightheaded yourself. For a split second, you freeze. Your brain tries to make it normal. Maybe they slipped. Maybe they fainted. But deep down, you already know what this is. Your training replays in fragments. Check for breathing. Call for help. Stay calm. None of it feels real when the air around you tastes like tin and panic. Someone, maybe you, maybe a co-worker, shouts for a manager. Another voice crackles over the intercom asking for emergency services. You kneel beside the person, your hands shaking, trying to find a pulse you don't quite trust yourself to locate. Their face is pale, lips faintly blue. You remember the safety video, the fake smiles, the staged scenarios, and you realise this is what they were trying not to say out loud. The minutes stretch. Every second feels too long. You try to focus on breathing evenly, on not inhaling too deeply, on not thinking about how this person had probably been standing right here 10 minutes ago. deciding between mirror-chrome and electric teal. When the paramedics arrive, it's like someone pressed play on the world again. Bright jackets, calm voices, the quiet authority of people who've done this too many times. They move with precision, asking quick questions, checking vitals, setting up oxygen. You step back, trying to be useful and invisible at the same time. Your co-workers gather at the end of the aisle, faces pale, eyes wide. The paramedics lift the person onto a stretcher. The hiss of the oxygen mask fills the silence. As they wheel them away, one of the responders gives you a brief nod, the kind that means you did what you could. You nod back, though your stomach twists at how little that feels like comfort. Then comes the cleanup, the part no one trains you for. Your manager hands you gloves and a mop and says something about protocol. You try not to look at the smear on the floor, at the can that's rolled into the corner like a piece of evidence from a crime scene. The smell lingers. Sweet. Chemical. Wrong. You clean until the tile gleams again, until there's no sign of what happened, except for the metallic taste still in your mouth. When the store reopens, the world pretends to move on. Customers drift through, asking about colours for nurseries and kitchen cabinets, oblivious to what's already been scrubbed away. You stand behind the counter, answering questions in your customer service voice, while your mind replays the sound of that can rolling, over and over. That night when you get home, you can still hear it. You take a long shower, trying to wash off the smell that clings to your clothes, your hair, your memory. But it doesn't leave. It never really does. From then on, every time you hear the faint rattle of a spray can in the distance, you feel that same sharp flicker of fear in your chest. A reminder that for most people, aisle 14 is just another part of the store. But for you, it's something else entirely. A warning, a memory, a smell you'll never quite forget. After the paramedics leave, the silence is deafening. Corporate tells you to sanitize and restock. You try not to breathe too deeply as you mop up the remains of someone's bad night. You wonder what the correct number of Lysol wipes is for this kind of tragedy. The store feels different now, heavier, hollow, as if the air itself is holding its breath. The paramedics' footprints still mark the concrete in faint outlines of dirt and shoe treads. You stand there for a moment, just staring at the space where it happened. The shelves look the same, the cans are still lined up in perfect little rows, but you can't shake the feeling that the whole aisle is staring back at you. Your manager breaks the silence first. Let's clean this up before customers come back. His voice cracks halfway through, and he clears his throat trying to reassemble authority. You nod, because what else is there to do? There's no page in the employee handbook titled How to Emotionally Process an Inhalant Overdose Between Restocks. You wheel out the yellow mop bucket, the one that squeaks like a dying seagull, and start mixing disinfectant. The smell of bleach hits you hard, colliding with the lingering sweetness of aerosol until the whole air becomes a nauseating cocktail of chemical irony. You start mopping. Each stroke of the mop feels too deliberate, too ritualistic, like you're performing some small act of exorcism. Your co-worker, Jen, appears beside you with a box of gloves and a face you've only ever seen at funerals. "I'll do the shelves," she says quietly. Together you work without speaking. She wipes down the metal racks, each pass erasing fingerprints, residue, traces of someone who was just here and now isn't. The rags turn grey. You both keep going anyway. Time starts to blur. You don't know how long you've been cleaning. Minutes, hours, it doesn't matter. The only rhythm is the squeak of the mop and the dull hum of the ventilation system that clearly isn't doing its job. Somewhere the store music kicks back on, as if to mock you. A cheerful ad for spring lawn fertilizer echoes down the aisle. You feel like you might scream. The manager hovers at the end of the row pretending to supervise but mostly avoiding eye contact. He's on the phone with corporate, nodding a lot. Yes, we'll file the report. Yes, we'll restock. Yes, we'll keep it quiet. He looks at you briefly and gives a thumbs up, as though that's an appropriate gesture for this particular flavour of trauma. Eventually the mop water turns a cloudy grey. You dump it out in the back, watching it swirl down the drain like a small miserable storm. Your hands smell like bleach no matter how many times you wash them. You check your phone, only 2:15 p.m. Somehow, it's still the same day. When you return to the paint aisle, the space looks almost normal again. The floor gleams under the fluorescent lights. The shelf is restocked. The scent of cleaning chemicals has overtaken the air completely, like the store itself is trying to overwrite the memory. If someone walked in right now, they'd never know anything happened here. But you know, the next customer who wanders in, an older woman asking about pastel colours for her sunroom, has no idea she's standing on a freshly sanitized tragedy. You help her, smile, mix her paint, make small talk about the weather. Your voice sounds steady, practiced. When she leaves, you realise your hands are still trembling slightly. That night, when the store finally closes, you sit in your car for a long time before starting the engine. The headlights illuminate the orange facade of the building, calm and ordinary, as if nothing inside it ever hurt anyone. You take one last look at the automatic doors and whisper something to no one in particular, a prayer, an apology, maybe both. Then you drive home with the windows down, hoping the night air will carry away the smell. It doesn't. Because the truth about cleanup, the part no one trains you for, is that the air clears long before your mind does. The next morning, a corporate email arrives. Incident review, maintaining store safety. It never says paint huffing. It says aerosol misuse. You sit in a meeting while your manager reads bullet points about vigilance and teamwork. You nod along. No one says the word death. The subject line is cheerful, the kind of upbeat phrasing that tries to make a tragedy sound like a team-building exercise. The email begins with, "We at corporate take safety very seriously." You can almost hear the legal department whispering over the commas. The text goes on to commend the store's quick action and timely communication, as though saving someone's life is just another KPI. It's signed by a senior vice president whose name you've only ever seen on generic holiday cards. By the time you finish reading, the guilt has been neatly formatted into bullet points. Remain vigilant. Report suspicious behaviour. Maintain a positive guest experience. Every phrase is soft, rounded and corporate approved, like bubble wrap around the real horror. You close the email, stare at the blinking cursor on your screen, and wonder how many synonyms for tragedy the company's lawyers went through before settling on incident. At 10 a.m, there's a mandatory all-staff meeting. The manager herds everyone into the break room where the fluorescent lights make everyone look like they've been awake for 48 hours. The folding chairs squeal against the linoleum as you all sit down. The manager, who looks like he hasn't slept since yesterday, stands at the front holding a clipboard and a bottle of water. He clears his throat. "So," he begins, voice flat and careful, "corporate wants us to know that safety is our number one priority. You already know what's coming. It's the same script they use after every crisis, whether it's a robbery, a forklift accident, or a nationwide scandal involving paint thinner. The phrases have been sanitized within an inch of their lives. We're a family here. We support one another. There is no blame, only learning opportunities." A hand goes up in the back. It's Jen, the co-worker who helped you clean yesterday. "Are they going to change anything?" she asks. The manager hesitates, a little too long. "They're reviewing procedures," he says. It's the kind of phrase that means absolutely nothing will happen. He goes on about new signage and increased awareness, about reminding customers that spray paint is a controlled item. He says the words, "aerosol misuse" again, and you feel a quiet rage spark in your chest. You glance around the room. Everyone else is doing the same thing, staring straight ahead, pretending to listen, pretending not to feel the collective exhaustion of being told to care without being allowed to act. Then come the memos. Laminated printouts appear in every aisle, reminding you to maintain awareness and be a safety leader. The font is Comic Sans, because nothing says we understand tragedy like a typeface invented for cartoon thought bubbles. The signs are taped near the paint aisle like talismans, as though a friendly reminder can ward off human fragility. By lunch, you've received 3 follow-up emails and 1 anonymous survey about how this incident made you feel. The options range from very supported to somewhat supported. There's no checkbox for angry and numb at the same time. You click neutral because that's what the system understands best. Corporate sends another message the next day, this one about Employee Appreciation Week. It includes a coupon for 10% off store brand coffee and an inspirational quote about perseverance. You read it twice, then delete it. A few days later, the corporate safety liaison arrives in a crisp blazer and sensible shoes. She walks the store with a clipboard, asking questions she already knows the answers to. "Would you say morale has been affected?" she asks. You look her dead in the eye and say, "No more than usual." She smiles and writes something down that probably translates to employee demonstrating resilience. By the end of the week, the store looks just as it did before, clean, quiet, corporate. The same songs loop over the speakers, the same customers ask the same questions, but every time you walk past aisle 14, your chest tightens. Because beneath the corporate language, beneath the safety slogans and the laminated memos, the truth remains simple and raw. A human being died here. And while corporate has already moved on to PowerPoints and policy revisions, you're still stuck in the echo of that silence, the kind that no memo can sanitize. 2 weeks later, every spray can is behind locked glass. Customers complain. You get a tiny brass key and the new title of chemical gatekeeper. You used to sell colour. Now you sell access. It feels less like retail and more like you're guarding the entrance to a mildly toxic prison. The first day of the lockdown feels surreal. The paint aisle, once a cathedral of open possibility, now looks like a crime exhibit. The shiny glass cases glint under fluorescent light, reflecting your face back at you in distorted fragments. Every can of spray paint sits neatly behind its transparent barrier, like captured treasure. Corporate says it's for safety. You know it's because no one trusts anyone anymore. They hand you the key, small, gold, and strangely heavy. It dangles from a retractable chain, clipped to your apron like a symbol of power you never ask for. You used to recommend colours, mix pigments, help people fix their walls and brighten their lives. Now your job is to unlock a cabinet, smile, and silently hope that the customer on the other side of the glass doesn't look too desperate. The customers hate it. Every single one of them. The first complaint comes before breakfast. "Why is it locked up?" a man asks, jabbing his finger at the case. "It's paint, not plutonium." You nod sympathetically and deliver the approved line. "It's just new store policy for customer safety." You don't mention the incident. You don't mention aisle 14. Soon you're saying that phrase so often it starts to sound like a prayer. New store policy for safety, corporate guidelines. It rolls off your tongue automatically, even when no one's listening. The regulars start to give you looks, some annoyed, some knowing. The retired birdhouse man calls it a prison for colour. You can't argue with him. It changes the rhythm of your work too. Before, you could glide between customers, chatting about tones and finishes. Now every interaction begins with a key. You walk to the case, unlock it, hand over the can, relock it, and hope they don't run. You start carrying the key like a nervous tick, twisting it between your fingers when the store gets quiet. You feel like a mall cop in an art supply dystopia. One afternoon, a teenager asks for metallic silver, the exact shade you've learned to dread. You try to keep your voice steady as you unlock the case. He smiles too wide, pays in cash, and leaves without making eye contact. You watch him through the window as he disappears into the parking lot, the can swinging in his hand like a promise. Corporate sends more emails about success metrics. They call the new system a proactive solution. They say incidents are down 43%, as if tragedy can be measured in percentages. The district manager visits, shakes your hand, and thanks you for enforcing policy with positivity. You smile for the photo he takes. Later, it shows up in an internal newsletter under the headline Heroes of Hazard Prevention. You don't recognize yourself in it. At night, when the store closes, you clean the fingerprints off the glass. The smudges shimmer under the lights. Oily, human, impossible to erase completely. You think about how strange it is, this new ritual of containment. The aisles are spotless, orderly, and suffocating. It's quieter now, yes, but not peaceful. The silence has weight. The worst part is when customers knock on the glass. They do it without thinking, tap, 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 like the colours might respond. You catch yourself flinching every time. You used to love the sound of cans shaking, that soft rattle of creation. Now it just reminds you of sirens. One evening, as you lock up for the night, you notice your reflection again. Tired eyes behind a glass wall full of warnings. You pocket the key, feeling its cool edge press against your leg. You tell yourself it's just another safety measure, just another policy. But deep down you know what it really is. A cage, not just for the paint, but for you. Because when safety becomes silence and colour becomes contraband, the job stops being about helping people create us and starts being about keeping the world contained. Parents start showing up, holding receipts and outrage. They insist it's all a misunderstanding. Their teenager was just painting skateboards. You listen politely, nod sympathetically, and wonder why every teenager in town suddenly has 6 skateboards. It begins quietly. A few parents wandering in with that familiar mix of confusion and righteous fury, the kind that only comes from realizing your child might be both smarter and dumber than you ever thought possible. They march up to the service desk, clutching a crumpled receipt like it's Exhibit Ohio in a courtroom drama. "There must be a mistake," one mother says, voice trembling with the confidence of someone who's never been wrong in their own kitchen. "My son isn't that kind of kid." You've heard this speech before. It's the same one people give when their dog bites the neighbour, or their car gets towed from a fire lane. It starts with denial, slides into justification, and ends somewhere near it could happen to anyone. You stand there, expression soft, voice calm, channeling every ounce of emotional customer service energy you can muster. The father next to her nods grimly. He was just working on a project, he says, for art class. You check the receipt. 6 cans of metallic silver, 2 reds, 1 black, and 1 labelled neon green blaze. You can almost see the graffiti glowing in your mind's eye. You smile politely and say, "That's great. Must have been quite a project." They don't laugh. The manager joins in, offering apologies that sound suspiciously like rehearsed legal statements. "We understand your concern, sir," he says, "but unfortunately store policy prevents us from," the father interrupts. "Are you accusing my son of something?" The air thickens instantly, like the store itself is trying to shrink away from the conversation. You've learned not to argue. Arguing doesn't change minds, it just sharpens the denial. So you let them talk. They explain that their teenager is misunderstood, creative, a free spirit. You nod sympathetically while remembering that last week the same free spirit was caught spraying his initials onto the back of a company truck. You're not here to ruin families. You're just the witness no one wants to acknowledge. Some parents go the other way. Not denial, but deflection. "It's your fault," one mother says. "You shouldn't even sell this stuff." You want to tell her you agree, that you'd gladly sell something less tragic, like garden hoses or patio lights, if it meant no one would ever inhale paint fumes again. But you can't say that. You just point to the safety poster and hand her the complaint form she'll never actually submit. Then there's the worst kind, the ones who already know the truth. They don't yell, they don't argue, they just stand there, quiet, looking smaller than when they came in. One woman shows you a photo of her son, prom night, tuxedo, smile too big for the frame. "He's been different," she says softly. You think this stuff could... You don't have the heart to lie. You just nod. After each encounter, you walk back to the paint aisle and stare at the locked cases. You see reflections, yours, theirs, everyone's, warped and doubled in the glass. It feels like a metaphor you didn't ask to be part of. Corporate calls these moments customer education opportunities. You call them what they are, tiny griefs disguised as errands. By the end of the week, the stories blur together. Every parent insists their child was the exception, not the rule. Every one of them leaves clutching some combination of guilt and paperwork, and you're left wondering how a simple product, something meant to decorate, to create, turned into a mirror for everything people don't want to face. You start to think that maybe the paint aisle isn't really about colour anymore. Maybe it's about denial, the layers people brush over the truth, hoping it'll dry before anyone notices what's underneath. By now, every employee has a story. You swap them over stale donuts and lukewarm coffee. Someone jokes that the store should hand out gas masks with the aprons. No one laughs, but everyone smiles anyway. The break room isn't really a room. It's more like a half-finished bunker with a microwave and a dream. The walls are a shade of beige that defies classification, and the air always smells faintly of reheated soup and existential dread. The table is permanently sticky, no matter how often it's wiped down. Someone's motivational poster about teamwork has curled up at the corners, giving it the haunted energy of a ghostly HR department. You sit in your usual spot, staring at the industrial coffee pot that's been running since the early Obama years. The coffee inside is an oily sludge that tastes like despair. But you drink it anyway because it's the only thing in the store stronger than the paint fumes. Around you, the other employees drift in one by one, faces drawn, voices low, all pretending this is a normal workplace and not a slow-motion case study in retail trauma. Jen starts the conversation, as she usually does. "So," she says, tearing a powdered donut in half, "anyone else dream about paint cans last night?" A few nods. Someone mutters, "Mine exploded." Someone else adds, "Lucky. At least you got some excitement." There's laughter, but it's the kind that sounds more like a pressure valve than humour. You all swap stories like war veterans in reflective vests. The guy from lumber talks about the time a customer tried to buy a live raccoon someone left in a cart. The cashier from garden recounts how an entire row of fertiliser collapsed like a chemical avalanche. But when someone mentions the incident, the conversation falters. Nobody names it directly anymore. It's become a kind of shared superstition. A ghost that lives between sips of cheap coffee. You fill the silence by staring at the faded calendar on the wall. It's still on last month. The corporate holidays are marked in cheerful red letters: Employee Appreciation Day, Safety Week, Team Spirit Friday. You realise you've lived through all three without noticing. "We should get hazard pay," someone says. "We should get therapy," someone else replies. Both statements feel equally impossible. Then the gallows humour starts, softly at first. Like a coping mechanism everyone silently agrees upon. "They should put the spray paint behind bulletproof glass," says the cashier, stirring sugar into her cup. "They already did," you remind her. "Then maybe they should put us behind glass," she says, and for a brief moment everyone actually laughs. It's not joyful exactly, but it's real. Humour becomes the glue that holds the shift together. You joke about corporate emails that sound like breakup letters, about how the manager's motivational speeches could double as funeral eulogies, about how every safety video now feels like foreshadowing. You laugh until it doesn't hurt to think about why you're laughing. There's comfort in the rhythm of it. These shared tired smiles over styrofoam cups and microwaved leftovers. You're all survivors of the same absurd little world, underpaid, overexposed, and somehow still showing up every morning to face the shelves. In the break room, the hierarchy dissolves. The manager sits beside the cashier. The night shift jokes with the stock crew. Titles and responsibilities melt away, leaving only people trying to hold themselves together with caffeine and bad humour. Eventually the timer on someone's phone buzzes. Lunch break's over. You all groan in unison, dragging yourselves up from the mismatched chairs like soldiers heading back to the front line. Someone tosses their cup into the overflowing trash can and says, "Same time tomorrow?" Everyone nods. Of course. Because no matter how heavy the day gets, the break room will always be there, offering nothing but burnt coffee, bad jokes, and the quiet reminder that you're not surviving this alone. And somehow, that's enough to keep you going back out into the fluorescent light. Corporate installs new cameras, new signs, and a new rule. Never leave spray paint unattended. You comply, because what else can you do? You smile at customers and say company policy, while quietly praying no one passes out next to the seasonal aisle. The installation starts at dawn, long before the store opens. 2 contractors in reflective vests and 1,000-yard stares march in, rolling ladders and spools of cable. They nod at you like you're part of the crime scene they've been sent to document. Within hours, new cameras bloom across the ceiling like digital mushrooms. Black domes, wide angles, silent, unblinking eyes. Corporate calls it a proactive investment in safety. You call it what it is, retail surveillance cosplay. By noon, the store looks like a low-budget spy thriller, complete with now under 24-hour monitoring signs that no one will ever read. The camera nearest your counter points directly at your forehead, so close it captures every sigh, every exhausted eye roll, every time you quietly mutter, "This job is slowly killing me." The training comes next. Another meeting, another PowerPoint. The safety coordinator, flown in from the regional office and powered by caffeine and fear, clicks through slides of security best practices. You learn thrilling new protocols, like how to spot suspicious aerosol activity, someone breathing. There's also a new escalation system. Observe, assess, act. Which sounds official until you realise act just means tell someone higher up. The manager nods along enthusiastically. "This will make customers feel safe," he says. You notice how he doesn't say employees. He prints out laminated cards with emergency numbers and attaches them to the counters. He reminds you to stay calm, stay professional, stay vigilant. You wonder when vigilant became corporate code for traumatized but still clocked in. By the end of the week, the paint aisle feels different. Not safer, just watched. You catch yourself glancing at the cameras, wondering who's on the other side of that feed. Is it security? Corporate? Some outsourced team in another time zone? You imagine them sipping coffee, watching you stack cans while the store hums around you, detached and clinical. The customers notice too. Some glance at the cameras nervously, while others joke about being on reality TV. A teenager points at one and says, "Smile, Mum? We're famous." You smile politely because company policy now includes not explaining that the cameras don't actually prevent anything. They just record it in high definition for future liability meetings. And then there's the paperwork. Every minor event becomes a report. A can dropped, a customer coughing too long near the aisle, a chemical odour complaint that turns out to be your co-worker reheating fish in the break room microwave. Each incident gets logged, time-stamped, and forwarded to corporate. The word incident has become so common it's lost all meaning. It could mean anything now, from spilled paint to mortal panic. One night, after closing, you stand beneath one of the new cameras and look straight up at it. A tiny red light blinks back. You think about all the things it's seen already, all the things it's missed. You wonder if the footage from aisle 14 still exists somewhere, archived in some database labelled training materials. The irony is, the cameras make you feel less safe. They're a constant reminder that something happened here bad enough to justify them. Every blinking light feels like an accusation, proof that prevention has given way to performance. You start carrying yourself differently, standing straighter, smiling more, not for customers, but for whoever might be watching. Every interaction becomes a scene, every checkout, a performance review. The store feels less like a workplace and more like a stage where the script keeps changing, but the ending never does. When your shift finally ends, you clock out, wave at the camera out of habit, and catch your reflection in the convex mirror near the exit. You look tired, worn down but compliant, exactly the kind of employee the cameras were designed to see. And as the automatic doors slide open, spilling you into the night, you realize something chilling. The surveillance worked, not by stopping anyone else, just by keeping you in line. One afternoon, a police officer stops by just to check in. He's polite, tired, and clearly been here before. You talk about policies, prevention, and paperwork. He thanks you for your vigilance. You thank him for existing. You both know it's not enough. You notice him before you hear him. The slow, deliberate walk of someone who's seen too much and is already expecting to see more. The uniform is crisp, the badge catches the fluorescent light, but his eyes are half-shadowed, dulled from repetition. He looks around the store with quiet recognition, the kind that says he's been here not once, not twice, but enough times to know the layout better than some of your newer co-workers. The manager appears instantly, as if conjured by the scent of authority. "Officer, always good to see you," he says too cheerfully, extending a hand. The officer smiles politely, the kind of smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Just doing a check-in," he replies, scanning the aisles. His tone is professional, but beneath it you hear the weariness of someone who's had the same conversation in a dozen stores across the city. You stand nearby, pretending to tidy the shelf, pretending not to listen. But you hear it all. The corporate phrasing, the stiff nods, the mentions of ongoing safety initiatives and community partnership. The manager gestures vaguely toward the newly installed cameras, the laminated safety posters, the locked paint cabinet. The officer nods, politely impressed. You both know these are props in a play called Pretending to Have Control. Then he drifts toward you. "You were working that day, right?" he asks gently. You nod. He doesn't press for details, he doesn't need to. The look in his eyes says he's already filed too many reports just like yours. "Rough one," he murmurs. The words are simple, but they land heavy. You can tell he means it. You talk about prevention, though it feels like wishful thinking. He tells you how the department's been responding to more inhalant calls lately, especially near strip malls and empty parking lots. "It's cheap," he says, shaking his head. "Easy to get, hard to stop." His radio crackles for a moment, a voice you can't quite make out, then silence again. You ask him if it ever gets better. He shrugs. Some days. You notice how he keeps glancing toward the spray paint aisle, as if the ghosts of old incidents still linger there. Maybe they do. The glass cabinet reflects him in perfect symmetry. Two versions of the same man. One trying to enforce safety, the other knowing it's impossible. When the conversation turns to paperwork, his posture stiffens. "We do what we can," he says. But after a while, it's all reports and forms. By the time we get there, it's already too late. He sounds less like a cop and more like a paramedic of bureaucracy, responding, documenting, moving on. You feel that sting of recognition. That's your life too. Your manager returns, holding 2 paper cups of coffee from the break room. The officer takes one gratefully. "Appreciate what you all are doing here," he says, and you want to ask what exactly he thinks you're doing besides mopping up and pretending it's progress. But you just nod and say thank you. Before he leaves, he lingers for a moment at the automatic doors staring out into the parking lot. "You know," he says softly, "the first time I came here, I thought this place smelled like fresh paint. Now it just smells like tired people." You both chuckle because the truth is too sharp to face without humour. Then he's gone, out into the sunlight, into his patrol car, into another call, another incident. The automatic doors close behind him, sealing the store back into its artificial calm. The radio plays faintly in the background, some upbeat tune about summer and freedom. You look down the aisle, the locked cases gleaming under sterile light, and realise that everyone's playing their part in this unspoken drama. The officer, the manager, you. Each one trying to preserve order in a system that's already cracked. And tomorrow, when another officer stops by just to check in, you'll nod, smile, and repeat the same conversation, because pretending it's enough is part of the job description. When you get home, the smell follows you. It's in your clothes, your hair, your dreams. You can't tell if it's psychological or chemical anymore. You light a candle labelled fresh linen. It smells like irony. You kick off your shoes by the door, that little ritual of trying to leave work outside, but it doesn't take. The smell has made the trip home with you, a hitchhiker that clings to your skin and your sense of normal. It's faint at first, a ghost of sweetness in the air. That same synthetic fruit scent that saturates aisle 14. But then it deepens, expands, seeps into everything. Your carpet, your couch, your evening. You toss your apron into the hamper like it's radioactive, but you already know it won't help. Tomorrow you'll open the closet and that same scent will drift out, as if the air itself has memory. You shower long and hot, scrubbing until your hands go red, but the water only seems to unlock new layers of the smell, sweet, metallic, with a hint of despair. The irony is that, on paper, you work with colour. Your job is supposed to be creative, even hopeful. People come to you when they want to make something new, repaint their kitchen, cover up an old mistake, brighten the space where they live. But lately every hue feels haunted. Even the cheerful ones, the summer sunrise and lemon glow, carry the undertone of solvent and sadness. You try to distract yourself. Music, dinner, scrolling through the infinite grey noise of the internet. But the mind has its own sense of smell. Every headline seems to echo what you already know too well. People are hurting in quiet, ridiculous ways. Ways you can't fix with corporate safety policies or laminated signs. You think of the teenagers, the parents, the officer, the endless cycle of incidents. You wonder how many other workers across the country are lighting the same ironic candles right now, trying to exorcise the smell of other people's pain. Sometimes you dream about it. Not the event itself, but the aftermath. You dream of wiping down shelves that never come clean, of a machine endlessly shaking cans that rattle like bones. The smell is always there in the dream, thick and cloying, until you wake up gasping and reach for the nearest window. You tell yourself it's just part of the job, that it'll fade eventually like everything else. But you start noticing how often the smell follows you into your day off, how your morning coffee somehow tastes faintly of latex, how your phone case smells like Primer, how even your dog sniffs you suspiciously after work. It's not just in your clothes anymore, it's in your lungs, your hair, your mind. At some point you stop fighting it. You stop buying candles and air fresheners that only mix irony with futility. You start opening your windows instead, letting in air that smells like rain or exhaust or nothing at all. Anything's better than the scent of aisle 14, but even as the weeks pass, it never really leaves. It hides in memory now, showing up in the oddest places, at gas stations, in parking garages, even in the moment you pass someone on the street wearing too much hairspray. You catch it for half a second and suddenly you're back there. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the sound of a can rattling somewhere behind you, the faint sweetness that always came before the panic. You take a deep breath, blink, and remind yourself. You're home. You survived the shift. You're not in the paint aisle anymore. But still, as you drift towards sleep, that ghost of a smell lingers in the dark, a reminder that some parts of the job never wash off. They just follow you quietly, waiting for the next time you strike a match and call it comfort. Your boss wins Manager of the Month for handling the incident with grace and efficiency. You watch him smile for the newsletter photo, standing in front of a wall of locked spray cans. You think about quitting. You don't. The announcement comes on a Wednesday morning, the same day the coffee machine decides to die again, sputtering out one final puff of steam like it's mocking you. The email subject line reads, "Celebrating excellence in leadership." You know instantly that it's not about you. The first image that loads is your manager's face, slightly overexposed, eyes glazed with the kind of corporate pride that only a bonus can buy. The photo caption reads, "Recognized for outstanding leadership during challenging circumstances." You close the email before you can finish the rest. By lunch, copies of the company newsletter are taped to the break room walls, as if anyone in this store has ever voluntarily read one. His face stares back from every corner, smiling, confident, posed in front of the glass paint cage like a man who conquered chaos rather than barely contained it. Handled with grace and efficiency, the text says. You try to remember which part was graceful. The panicked phone call to 911 or the part where he handed you gloves and told you to sanitize and restock. He walks into the break room holding a small certificate framed in faux wood. "They're sending a pizza party next week," he says with a grin. The words hit the room like a damp rag. Jen mutters something about pepperoni being a poor substitute for therapy. You all nod politely anyway, because that's what you do in retail. You smile while the world slowly collapses. The party arrives on Friday, 2 lukewarm pizzas and a laminated card signed by regional management. The smell of grease mixes with the lingering chemical undertone that never quite leaves the building. The manager claps you all on the back and tells you how proud he is of the team. "We pulled together," he says, as if trauma bonding counts as teamwork. You want to ask him if he actually remembers the look on that customer's face before the ambulance came, or if he's managed to file that underhandled efficiently too. The next week his photo makes it onto the corporate homepage. A quote sits beneath it. "In times of crisis, leadership is about staying calm, following protocol and supporting your team. You almost choke on your coffee." The only thing he did calmly that day was step out of the way. Still, you don't hate him. Not really. You've been around long enough to know that management isn't about competence, it's about survival. He didn't earn Manager of the Month for compassion, he earned it for paperwork, for filling out the incident response form in under an hour, for making sure the corporate liability box got ticked. In the grand hierarchy of crisis, empathy doesn't rank nearly as high as efficiency. At closing time, he thanks you again for being part of the solution. You force a smile, because even bitterness requires energy you don't have anymore. He locks up the paint cage like a zookeeper tucking in dangerous animals, then turns off the lights. "We did good," he says. The silence that follows feels heavier than approval. On your drive home, you pass the giant billboard with the store logo glowing against the night sky. You imagine his smiling photo up there, shining like a beacon of corporate success. You wonder how many managers of the month across the country are being celebrated for tragedies they never truly faced. You get home, peel off your orange apron and toss it on the chair. You stare at it for a long moment. You think about quitting, really quitting this time, finding a job that doesn't smell like paint and moral exhaustion. But you don't. You just sit there in the quiet, the glow from your phone reflecting off the Manager of the Month email still sitting unread in your inbox. You don't open it, you don't delete it either, you just leave it there, like everything else you've learned to live with. The holidays arrive, and with them a new line of aerosol-based joy. Fake snow, glitter spray, pine-scented everything. You sell it all with a festive smile, trying not to think about what happens when someone decides to get creative in the parking lot. December hits like a scented bomb. The moment you clock in, you're greeted not by the smell of paint thinner and dust, but by a chemically engineered winter wonderland. The shelves that once held sombre industrial greys and practical primers now gleam with tins of holiday shimmer, candy cane sparkle, and frosted pine. The marketing posters are everywhere, smiling families, cozy sweaters, a golden retriever that definitely doesn't have to breathe this air. The first shipment arrives early in the month, pallets stacked high with aerosol snow, metallic glitter spray, and multi-purpose festive mists. You and your co-workers tear open the boxes, already knowing half of it will end up in customer carts, and the other half in the hands of kids who think clouding the air with glitter is a fun way to spend a Friday night. Corporate sends an email reminding everyone to embrace the magic of the season. You imagine them typing that in an office that smells like cinnamon and clean oxygen. By midweek, the store transforms into a peppermint-scented war zone. Customers rush in for last-minute decor, armed with coupons and caffeine. A mother waves a can of Snowblast Deluxe at you like it's a hostage situation. "Does this stain?" she asks. You tell her it shouldn't, but the truth is you have no idea. Nothing about these products feels trustworthy. They're flammable, fragrant, and somehow both festive and threatening at the same time. Every year it's the same. You help people pick out fake snow for their driveways, golden glitter for their wreaths, and evergreen bliss for their air ducts. And every year, there's one instant, someone who thought spray snow would look beautiful on their car and discovered too late that it cements itself to the windshield. Or worse, someone in the parking lot who decides to get into the holiday spirit in the most literal, aerosol-assisted way. You start to dread the afternoons, when the combination of paint fumes and pine fragrance turns the air into a headache disguised as joy. The new air fresheners by the registers try to mask it, but they only make it worse. Frosted pine smells less like winter and more like if anxiety had a scent. One night, you're closing up when a customer rushes in, desperate for a last-minute can of glitter spray. She's hosting a holiday party and needs the perfect shimmer for the centerpiece. You hand her the can, smile through your exhaustion, and watch her hurry away. You can't help but think about how something so small, so shiny, can hide so much unease, how people spray a little sparkle over their stress and call it cheer. The next day, you're greeted with a new memo from corporate. Seasonal safety reminder, ensure proper handling of festive aerosols. It's the same memo as last year, just with clip art of snowflakes added. You file it away, pour another cup of lukewarm coffee, and return to your post beneath the garland-wrapped security camera. By Christmas Eve, the store hums like a hive of tired elves. You hand out paint samples with one hand and sweep glitter off the floor with the other. The radio loops through its 15th rendition of Jingle Bell Rock, and you find yourself humming along, not out of joy but survival. When the doors finally close that night, you walk outside into the cold air, and for the first time all season, you smell something real. Wet asphalt, exhaust, faint traces of snow. It cuts through the artificial sweetness that's been clinging to your lungs for weeks. You breathe deeply, letting the chill sting a little. Because for all the holiday talk of miracles and warmth, the real miracle is simpler. Surviving another December under fluorescent lights, covered in glitter, smiling through the frost. The new edition arrives in the mail, Section 12, Hazardous Materials, updated. It's 14 pages longer but somehow says less. You wonder if the lawyers got paid by the synonym. It shows up in the break room one morning stacked neatly beside the coffee maker that no longer makes coffee but still hums out of habit. A box full of glossy binders, each wrapped in plastic like a gift nobody asked for. The cover is bright orange, embossed with the words Employee Handbook, 2026 edition, as if rebranding bureaucracy could make it any more meaningful. Your manager announces the update during the pre-shift meeting, holding one up like a prize on a game show. Corporate's made a few small changes, he says, mostly clarifications. You glance at Jen, who mouths, "Clarifications means we did something wrong." You both suppress a laugh because that's the only safe reaction when management starts quoting legal disclaimers before 9 a.m. You sit down later to actually read it, partly out of curiosity, partly because you ran out of willpower to scroll your phone. The first pages are familiar enough. Our mission, our values, our commitment to safety. You skim through hollow phrases about teamwork and integrity, wondering if anyone in corporate has ever stood in the paint aisle while an aerosol can explode 3 feet away. Then you find Section 12. It's thicker than the rest, like the company tried to build a barricade out of paper. Hazardous materials, updated. The old version was 2 pages long. This one reads like a novella written by someone who's never seen a store, but really likes the word procedure. Every paragraph is hedged with phrases like, to the best of your ability and where practical. It's corporate poetry, vague, cautious, and incapable of taking responsibility for anything. You read a passage that says, in the event of an incident involving hazardous aerosols, employees should follow all appropriate steps to ensure the continued safety of all present parties. You stare at that sentence for a long time, wondering if it was meant to sound comforting or just legally airtight. It feels less like a rule book and more like a warning label on your job. There's a new subheading called Post-Incident Emotional Wellness. It sounds promising until you realize it's just 3 sentences long. Employees may experience stress or discomfort following a safety-related event. We encourage affected team members to reach out to our employee assistance hotline during business hours. You check the hours, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. You close the binder. The hotline won't be open when things actually happen, after hours under buzzing lights, when you're the only one left breathing through a paper mask that smells like bleach and guilt. The rest of the handbook is a masterclass in euphemism. Accident becomes operational interruption. Injury becomes incident of physical strain. Even death has been replaced with irreversible personnel outcome. You start to wonder if the lawyers played a game to see who could invent the most creative way to not say what they mean. At lunch, everyone flips through their copies. The cashier finds a section about customer sensitivity that warns against discussing emotionally charged events in front of shoppers. The janitor finds a new rule requiring all spill cleanup to be logged for audit purposes. Someone else points out that the word trust now appears 27 times, usually in sentences that end with management. By the time your break ends, the binder already looks worn, coffee-stained and slightly warped from the humidity. It'll live in the break room now, gathering dust beside last year's edition, and the one before that. A quiet archive of corporate panic, layered in print. You put it back on the shelf and head for the paint aisle. The new rules won't change anything, not really. The same lights still hum, the same air still stings, and the same problems keep getting renamed instead of fixed. Somewhere in the world, a lawyer is probably celebrating this update. Another small victory in the war against accountability. But you've got customers waiting, cans rattling, and a key clipped to your apron. No handbook in the world can tell you how to handle that. Word gets around. The news calls it a troubling trend. Customers whisper about the store where that thing happened. You stop correcting them. It's easier to let the myth take over than to explain the truth. It starts small, as most rumours do, a headline, a passing comment, a shared Facebook post that gets everything slightly wrong but catchy enough to stick. The story spreads like spilled paint, seeping into every corner of town. Did you hear about the Home Depot thing? Someone says at the grocery store. Yeah, my cousin's friend's co-worker said it was horrific. The details change with every retelling. Sometimes it's a robbery, sometimes an explosion, sometimes a kid who just couldn't handle the fumes. No one ever gets it quite right, but they all agree on one thing. It happened here. By the time you open the store the next morning, the myth has already settled in. A couple walks through the sliding doors, glancing around with the cautious curiosity of people entering a crime scene. They whisper to each other, loud enough for you to hear, "Is this the one?" You keep smiling. It's easier that way. Correcting people means revisiting details that still sit like lead in your chest, so you let the myth live. At least myths don't ask follow-up questions. Corporate pretends not to notice the shift in tone. They call it reputation management. You call it damage control with a smiley face. A memo arrives with instructions on how to address customer concerns proactively. You skim through it. The recommended phrase is, "We're always committed to community safety and continuous improvement." You memorize it like a script, because sooner or later someone will ask you what really happened, and this is the only line you're allowed to say. Even the regulars start acting differently. The old man with the birdhouses now asks if the bad aisle is still open. Marianne, your favourite conspiracy theorist, leans across the counter and whispers, "I told you this place had energy." You can't argue with that. It does have energy. Heavy, fluorescent and vaguely metallic. Then the local paper runs an article. The title, "Tragedy in Retail, the Hidden Dangers of Everyday Products." The store's name appears in the second paragraph. Not officially, not quoted, just implied. One local branch of a major hardware retailer has seen multiple incidents involving aerosol misuse. It's careful journalism, sanitized for public consumption, but everyone in town can connect the dots. The days that follow feel slower. Customers avoid the paint aisle like it's cursed. Some of them whisper condolences you didn't ask for. Others ask inappropriate questions with the kind of morbid curiosity only true boredom can breed. So, was it someone who worked here? Did they die right there? You keep your answers short. You learn to redirect conversations toward neutral topics. Sales, warranties, colour matching. Anything that doesn't end with the word unresponsive. Behind the scenes, the employees deal with it their own way. Jen starts referring to the store as the chemical chapel. The Night Stalkers take turns daring each other to work alone in aisle 14. The jokes are dark, but that's the only way to make it bearable. It's not disrespect, it's defence. But what hurts most isn't the rumour itself, it's how it lingers, not as tragedy, but as branding. When people say your store's name now, they add a knowing look. You've become the one where it happened. The myth has swallowed the truth whole, replacing reality with a story that fits neatly into people's curiosity and then moves on. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, you stand in the aisle after close and listen to the hum of the lights. The shelves gleam, spotless, sterile, the kind of cleanliness only guilt can buy, and in that hum, you hear the faint echo of what really happened, the version that doesn't make it into headlines or customer gossip, the one only you and a few others remember. It's the kind of truth that doesn't spread, not because it's hidden, but because no one wants to carry it. So you lock up the store, turn off the lights, and let the myth do what it does best. Tell a story that's easier to believe than the real one. You develop habits, counting cans, rearranging shelves, humming to yourself. Sometimes you imagine the paint aisle as a kind of temple, bright, sterile, and absurdly tragic. You're the high priest of paint thinner praying for a quiet shift. It starts innocently enough. You tell yourself it's just about keeping busy, straightening labels, wiping down counters, alphabetizing paint samples that no one's going to buy. But it's not really about tidiness. It's about control. When everything else feels unpredictable, there's comfort in making sure Arctic Mist sits exactly to the left of Bone White. The ritual keeps your mind quiet. The rhythm of it, pick up, align, step back, repeat, feels like a slow heartbeat. Eventually you start talking to yourself while you work. Not out loud, not yet. Just the kind of murmured running commentary that makes you feel like a narrator in your own strange documentary. Here we see the modern retail worker in their natural habitat. It's funny at first, then it becomes necessary. Humour is the thin thread holding you together, the one thing keeping the absurd from becoming unbearable. You trade dark jokes with your co-workers, the kind that would sound cruel to anyone else but are strangely sacred among retail survivors. At least the paint fumes kill brain cells evenly, Jen says one night. Symmetry is important. You laugh harder than you should because there's truth hiding inside the joke. It's always like that. The darker the humour, the closer it is to honesty. Sleep becomes its own challenge. On your nights off, you lie in bed and hear phantom sounds, the rattle of spray cans, the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant beep of the price scanner. It's as if your brain refuses to clock out. When you finally drift off, your dreams take place in the store. You find yourself endlessly restocking shelves that never stay organised, chasing the same rolling paint can down an aisle that never ends. You wake up tired, with that faint chemical tang still clinging to your throat, even though you've been home for hours, so you develop other habits. Breathing exercises in the stockroom, music through one earbud during cleanup, counting steps from one end of the aisle to the other. You don't call it mindfulness, but that's what it is. Survival disguised as routine. You even start assigning personalities to the paint colours. Faded denim feels dependable. Crimson Valor is a bit dramatic. Sunset Drift has clearly seen some things. It's absurd, but so is everything else about your job. Some nights you linger after closing, just to stand in the empty store. There's something peaceful about it when the customers are gone. A strange stillness, like the calm after a storm. You turn off your headset, take one long look down aisle 14, and whisper a little prayer to no one in particular. Please let tomorrow be quiet. You've learned that denial can be functional when applied in moderation. You stop trying to carry every incident, every panic, every headline. You compartmentalise. You fold the fear neatly like an old receipt and tuck it somewhere you can't see. Because if you thought too hard about the truth, that your job involves watching people unravel in fluorescent lighting, you'd never come back. So you keep smiling. You make jokes. You restock. You hum. You survive. And somewhere in the hum of the lights and the rattle of the cans, you realise that coping isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about learning how to keep breathing in a place that always smells faintly of paint and grief, and somehow still calling it work. Working late means fewer customers but more ghosts. You hear noises you can't quite explain, the rattle of cans, the whisper of air vents, the faint echo of Sweet Home Alabama. You tell yourself it's just the HVAC. The store after hours feels like a different planet. The moment the last customer leaves, the air changes, heavier somehow, quieter but not peaceful. The music doesn't stop, but it becomes background noise to the silence between songs. The fluorescent lights hum louder when no one's talking. You tell yourself it's your imagination, that the store just sounds emptier, but deep down, you know the paint aisle hums differently at night. You start your closing routine the same way every night. Tidy the shelves, scan the aisles for spills, count down the register. You move on autopilot, the motions comforting in their predictability. But once you're alone, even those familiar steps feel eerie. Every sound becomes amplified. The creak of the ladder, the roll of a stray cart, the faraway slam of a door that's supposed to be locked. You keep glancing at the security cameras, not because you expect to see anyone, but because you want proof that there's no one else here. It's funny. The things that scare you aren't the things you'd expect. You're not afraid of burglars or accidents anymore. You're afraid of memory. You're afraid of turning a corner and catching a whiff of that sweet, chemical smell again, lingering where it shouldn't be. You tell yourself the store's clean, the air filters are new, but your brain doesn't buy it. Smell is memory's cruelest trick, and yours never stopped working. Around midnight, the intercom clicks on for no reason, just static. It happens often enough now that you don't jump anymore. You just mutter corporate ghosts under your breath and keep working. Still, every time it happens, you half expect to hear a voice come through. Not words, just the shape of something familiar. You sweep aisle 14 slowly, the broom bristles whispering against the tile. The shelves glint in the harsh light, every can perfectly aligned, locked behind glass like a display at a museum for bad decisions. You think about how many times you've walked this aisle, how it's become something between a workplace and a haunted monument. You know, every stain, every chip in the floor, every creak in the shelving. It's strange how tragedy, when repeated enough, becomes routine. Sometimes you talk to the store, not out loud, but in that quiet, tired way people talk to their cars or their plants. You tell it things like, "We're doing okay tonight," or "Let's keep it calm." You've developed a superstition that if you acknowledge the store, it'll behave. If you don't, it might remind you who's really in charge. The worst part of the night is clock out. The lights dim automatically, and for a few seconds you're caught in that half-dark where everything looks too still. You lock the doors, glance down the aisles one last time, and for a moment you swear you see a can out of place. Something small, something shining at the edge of the shelf. You know it wasn't there a second ago. You stare at it too long, debating whether to fix it or walk away. You walk away. Outside, the air feels thin and cold, too real after hours of recycled store oxygen. The parking lot hums with the low buzz of lights, and for a moment, you breathe easier. Then you realize you can still smell it. That faint trace of paint and pine, sweet and metallic, clinging to your jacket. You zip it up tight and keep walking. Because the truth is, you're not sure if the ghosts in the store ever leave, or if you just take them home with you every night, one faint breath of aerosol at a time. They hire a new employee, bright-eyed and enthusiastic. You train him on colour matching and safety. He says the smell doesn't bother him yet. You nod, knowing it will. He arrives on a Monday, which already feels like a bad omen. Mondays are the kind of day when the air itself seems heavier, thick with weekend regret and corporate optimism. His name's Tyler, though he introduces himself like he's trying to sell you something. "Happy to be here," he says, shaking your hand with that firm grip of someone who still believes in the concept of work ethic. You like him immediately, which makes you feel slightly guilty. His uniform is new, bright orange apron, crisp and unwrinkled, safety goggles still in their plastic wrapping. He smells faintly of detergent, coffee and hope. You almost warn him that the store will take that from him eventually, but you don't. Everyone deserves their first illusion. You start him on colour matching. Simple enough. Pour, mix, shake, smile. He watches carefully, nodding too much, asking questions like, how precise does it need to be? And do you ever get tired of the noise? You tell him, you stop hearing it after a while. It's true, but you leave out the part where you start feeling it instead. That low mechanical thrum that vibrates somewhere behind your ribs. When you hand him his first can, he inhales deeply. Smells kind of nice, he says. You laugh before you can stop yourself, not cruelly. Just in that tired way you laugh when you see someone about to walk into the same invisible wall you've been hitting for years. Give it time, you say. It grows on you, like mould. By day 3, the shine starts to dull. He stops whistling. He learns that corporate doesn't like silence, so the music loops endlessly. The same 5 songs cycling like a clock that measures exhaustion instead of time. He asks you if the lights ever flicker like that for you too. You tell him, only when I blink. The smell begins to bother him around the end of the first week. You see it in the way he exhales after walking through the paint aisle, the subtle wince, the squint of eyes trying not to water. He buys a new cologne, one of those aggressively masculine scents meant to drown out the industrial sweetness of solvent and latex. It doesn't work. Nothing does. By week 2, he's asking questions that no one should have to ask. Did something happen here? He's heard the whispers already. The customers who drop half-finished sentences. The co-workers who lower their voices when they say aisle 14. You tell him the official line. We had an incident. It's handled. He nods, but you can tell he knows there's more. He just hasn't earned the full truth yet. That comes later, when the smell starts following him home. One night, as you both close up, he lingers by the counter. I keep thinking about it, he says quietly, about what it must have been like. You hand him the keys, pretending not to understand. He continues, I mean being here. When it happened. You meet his eyes, and for a moment, you see the version of yourself that still cared enough to ask. You hand him the mop and say, you'll stop thinking about it eventually. It's both a lie and a mercy. By the end of his first month, he's just another one of you, humming absent-mindedly while restocking, joking about safety videos, avoiding the aisle without realizing he's avoiding it. The smell doesn't bother him anymore. That's how you know it's gotten inside him. One night, after closing, you find his new apron hanging in the break room, a little less bright, a little more real. You smile sadly. Everyone starts out fresh. No one stays that way for long. One day, a customer slips past anyway. You watch the footage later. The hesitation, the choice, the collapse. The cameras captured everything, except prevention. You wonder if history will ever stop repeating itself. The footage starts like every other ordinary shift. The grainy timestamp sits in the corner of the screen, blinking indifferently. Aisle 14 looks as it always does. Too bright, too clean, too quiet. The cameras see everything but understand nothing. The customer enters from the left side of the frame. You remember them vaguely. Mid-20s, maybe younger, moving like someone trying to appear purposeful but not seen. They pause near the locked cabinet, pretending to study the colours. You watch their shoulders rise and fall, the nervous rhythm of someone already in a private war with themselves. You know this posture. Everyone who works in paint long enough does. It's the stillness before a decision, the invisible weight pressing down on someone who's already halfway gone. The cameras record the hesitation in perfect clarity, the way they glance around, the way they fiddle with their sleeve, the way they finally reach for what they shouldn't. You fast forward through the inevitable. Even in rewind, it looks the same. One person shrinking under fluorescent light, while the rest of the world carries on. When it's over, the video ends abruptly, like tragedy edited for time. Corporate reviews the footage, of course. They always do. They call it incident analysis, though it feels more like ritualized guilt. You sit in a small office with your manager and someone from regional safety, watching the clip again on a small monitor that smells faintly of disinfectant. The regional rep takes notes, nodding occasionally, murmuring things like, We'll update our response protocols. You want to ask how many protocols it takes to save a life, but you already know the answer, one more than anyone ever writes. When the meeting ends, they thank you for your composure, for your dedication during a challenging situation. You sign a form acknowledging that you've reviewed the footage. The words blur as you read them. You initial a line next to employee understands that safety procedures were properly followed. You sign it, even though the phrase properly followed feels obscene. That night, the store feels haunted in a way the cameras can't record. You find yourself looking up at them every few minutes, those dark little domes blinking red in the ceiling. They've become part of the architecture now, omniscient and utterly useless. You wonder if anyone at corporate actually watches all this footage, or if it just sits in a server somewhere, archived tragedy in 720p. The next morning, a new sign appears above the paint counter. For your safety, all spray paint purchases require associate assistance. You stare at it for a long time. It's supposed to reassure customers, but all you can see is a quiet confession. We know what happens here. The store goes on, as it always does. Customers walk past the aisle, oblivious. Some whisper, some avoid eye contact. You keep restocking, smiling when you need to, answering questions about primer and colour consistency. But the cameras keep watching, and so do you. Sometimes when you're alone, you imagine the footage from your own shift. The unending routine of small talk, cleaning, pretending. You imagine a future meeting where someone reviews it, pausing over each frame, analysing your body language, and concluding that everything was handled efficiently. Because that's what the cameras do best. They record the symptoms, not the cause. They catch the moment the world falls apart, but never the silence that built up to it. And as you stand there beneath their gaze, surrounded by rows of neatly locked cans, you realise that in a place like this, surveillance isn't safety, it's just documentation. Proof that we saw everything and stopped nothing. Your performance review goes well. You're dependable, resilient, and great with customers. You get a 5-cent raise. You celebrate by buying coffee that costs more than that. The review happens in the back office, a windowless cube that smells faintly of toner and managerial discomfort. The walls are covered in laminated safety posters, each one a monument to corporate optimism. Teamwork builds success, and safety is everyone's responsibility. You sit across from your manager, who's clutching a clipboard and smiling the kind of smile that says, "I hate this as much as you do." He starts with the small talk, easing into the ritual. How do you think this year went? It's a trap question. You could tell him about the double shifts, the endless restocks, the nightmares, the smell that lives in your clothes. But you don't. You say, "Pretty good." He nods, relieved. It's always easier when employees keep the illusion alive. He flips through your evaluation sheet. Each section has a neat little checkbox: attendance, productivity, customer service, teamwork. You score above average on all of them. You know that means nothing. Corporate invented a scale where no one is excellent, just slightly more tolerable. He pauses at safety awareness and underlines it. Given everything that happened this year, he says, "We really appreciate how composed you were." You wonder if composed is their polite word for numb. Then comes the scripted praise. You're dependable. You've really become a core part of the team. You nod, because what else is there to say? Dependability is just another way of saying you show up even when you shouldn't have to. He continues, "Your attitude has been great, especially under pressure. You want to laugh. You don't have an attitude anymore, just muscle memory." Finally, he gets to the part that matters. He lowers his voice as if he's delivering good news in a confessional. "So corporate approved a small raise for you." He slides the paper across the desk like it's a winning lottery ticket. You glance down. 5 cents. Not $5, not even 50 cents. 5. You stare at the number, trying to decide if it's insulting or just surreal. He's watching your face closely, waiting for gratitude, so you smile. "Wow, thank you." He beams. Well deserved. The conversation shifts to growth opportunities. He mentions new safety modules, leadership workshops. maybe even a chance to mentor new hires, as if training the next wave of underpaid survivors is a reward. You nod politely, already picturing yourself giving the same talk to the next bright-eyed new guy who hasn't yet realised this job doesn't get better. It just gets older. At the end, he prints out a copy of your review for your records. You sign it without reading the fine print. Somewhere, in a folder in a cloud server, your entire year has been distilled into a few bullet points and a wage adjustment that won't cover a pack of gum. Afterward, you clock out and head straight to the coffee shop across the street. You order something overpriced and seasonal, with caramel drizzle and extra whipped cream, because if you're going to celebrate an insult, you might as well make it sweet. As you sip, you think about how the company spent more money printing your review than they gave you for the year. Still, you can't quite bring yourself to be angry. You've been here long enough to know that in retail, disappointment is just part of the uniform. You fold the review paper into your apron pocket and tell yourself that dependable is at least something. Then you finish your coffee, toss the cup, and get ready to do it all again tomorrow, dependable as ever, 5 cents richer, and not a single illusion poorer. When you finally quit, it's not dramatic. You just hand in your apron, nod at your manager, and step outside into fresh air. For the first time in years, it doesn't smell like paint. You breathe deep and it feels like freedom, or maybe just oxygen. It happens quietly, the way most endings do. No outburst, no big speech, no cinematic swell of music as you storm out into the sunset. Just a moment of stillness behind the counter, a decision that's been building for months finally slipping into place. You finish a transaction, smile at the customer, and realise you can't do this one more day. Not one more fake. Have a great afternoon. Not one more chemical-scented morning pretending to care about shades of beige. You set down the receipt book like a burden you forgot you were carrying. Your manager doesn't seem surprised. He's seen it before. People burn out here like cheap light bulbs. He gives you the standard corporate send-off, a handshake, a practiced smile, and the words, "We'll miss you around here." You both know it isn't true. You'll be replaced by Tuesday. By next week, someone new will be standing where you stood, wearing a crisp apron and a nervous grin, repeating your lines like a script they haven't rehearsed yet. The exit interview is a formality. HER calls it conversation, but it's really just paperwork with small talk stapled to it. You sit across from a woman whose smile has the elasticity of someone trained in corporate empathy. She asks how your overall experience was. You say it was good. She asks why you're leaving. You tell her you're looking for new opportunities. It's not a lie exactly, just a safer version of the truth. You can't put, because I'm tired of pretending this store isn't haunted by failure and fumes on a form. She thanks you for your candour and slides a pen across the table for your signature. You sign your name, neat and deliberate, right beneath a paragraph that says you departed in good standing. You imagine those words printed on your tombstone. When it's done, you hand over your badge and apron. The weight of them surprises you. Small objects that have somehow come to represent years of monotony, exhaustion, and strange loyalty. You half expect them to hum, to cling, to refuse to let go, but they don't. They just sit there on the desk, lifeless, waiting for the next person to inherit them. The walk to the parking lot feels different this time. The automatic doors whoosh open, and for the first time in years the air hits your lungs clean. It's sharp, raw, and startlingly real. You stand there for a moment, breathing like someone learning how again. The smell of asphalt and distant grass feels almost holy after years of acrylic and solvent. You glance back once, just to see it. The orange glow of the sign, the endless rows of carts, the faint hum of fluorescent lights spilling out onto the pavement. It doesn't look menacing anymore, just tired. Like an old friend you've finally outgrown. You drive away slowly, half expecting to feel regret. You don't. What you feel instead is quiet. Not the sterile quiet of the break room or the hum of the empty aisles, but a deeper kind. A kind that means something's over and that's okay. That night your clothes still smell faintly of paint, but it's the last time you'll notice it. You light a candle, something earthy, something clean, and sit by the window. The world outside is still going, oblivious and beautiful, and you realise how small the store really was compared to all this. You don't know what's next, but for now you know this. You survived aisle 14, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. A month after the last incident, an all-staff email lands in your inbox titled Prioritising Your Mental Health. It's from someone at corporate whose headshot looks suspiciously generated. The message is full of phrases like resilience, self-care, and remember to breathe, which feels ironic given the chemical fog you work in. It suggests meditation apps, hydration, and mindful reflection. None of it mentions hazard pay or better ventilation. You read it on your 5-minute break, surrounded by the soft hiss of paint canisters and the distinct sound of your sanity evaporating. You close the email, take a deep breath, through your mask this time, and go back to aisle 14. You almost miss it at first, buried between weekly promotions and safety reminders. The subject line is so polished, so upbeat, it could belong to a toothpaste ad. Let's make wellness a priority together. The exclamation mark feels like an apology in advance. You click it open out of morbid curiosity, half expecting a coupon code for inner peace. The sender is someone from corporate engagement and employee well-being. You've never met them, and judging by their glossy headshot and vaguely human smile, you're not sure anyone has. The email opens with a cheery greeting. Dear valued team member. You can almost hear the voice, perky, rehearsed, and entirely devoid of actual concern. The first paragraph congratulates you for making it through a challenging season. You picture the writer sipping almond milk in an ergonomic chair, typing those words while surrounded by air that doesn't smell faintly of death and disinfectant. The message continues. We understand that working in a dynamic retail environment can be stressful. That's why we're here to support you. The support, as it turns out, consists of 3 hyperlinks. One to a meditation app trial, one to a corporate blog post about the power of gratitude, and one to a printable mindfulness colouring page featuring a mandala shaped like the company logo. You scroll further. The bullet points begin. Stay hydrated. Take deep breaths throughout the day. Remember, a positive attitude is contagious. You stop reading for a moment, staring at that last line. Contagious. You think about how everything in the paint aisle already feels contagious. The fumes, the fatigue, the quiet dread. If positivity were airborne, maybe it could compete. There's a short section on mental health awareness, but it feels like someone copy-pasted it from a wellness website. We all struggle sometimes, it says, but remember, you are never alone. You look around the break room. Jen is eating chips in silence, scrolling through her phone. The vending machine hums like a small planet dying. You think, this is what never alone looks like. The closing paragraph is where the email truly shines, an artful mix of marketing and moral detachment. We're proud of our team's resilience and commitment to excellence, it reads. Together, we can continue building a safe and supportive workplace. You wonder if safe means the same thing to them as it does to you. There's no mention of the incident, no acknowledgement of the air still heavy with memory, no suggestion that maybe, just maybe, paying a living wage might improve morale more effectively than a link to an app that plays ocean sounds. Just one final line. Remember to breathe. You laugh, out loud this time, because breathing is the one thing this job has actively tried to make harder. You close the email and stare at the screen until your reflection appears. Tired eyes, grey lighting, the faintest shadow of a smile that doesn't reach your face. You mark it as read, toss your phone into your locker and check your watch. 2 minutes left on break. Outside the door, the store hums its eternal tune. Compressors, fans, rattling cans, the mechanical heartbeat of capitalism pretending to care. You pull your mask back on, inhale the familiar cocktail of paint and irony, and return to aisle 14, enlightened, hydrated, and exactly as unwell as before. One morning, you arrive to find a news van parked outside. The headline writes itself, Deadly trend at local hardware store. A reporter in a neon blazer asks if you'd like to comment on behalf of the working class. You politely decline and point them toward management, who are currently pretending to rearrange shovels. The camera crew films slow pans of the spray paint aisle, and suddenly your workplace looks like a crime scene on national television. By noon, the story's online. By evening, your aunt has texted you the link with "Is this your store?" and a prayer emoji. The parking lot is full before the store even opens, not with customers, with tripods, cables, and bright lights that make everything look 10 degrees more tragic. The news anchor stands near the entrance, microphone in hand, looking both solemn and airbrushed. She rehearses her lines while a cameraman adjusts the lighting, carefully angling it so the logo above the doors gleams just right. You think about how surreal it is, your store, your aisle, suddenly part of the narrative. Inside, management is in full damage control mode. The manager's voice over the intercom is tight, fake cheerful. "Team, let's stay positive today and focus on excellent customer service," which is corporate speak for do not under any circumstances say the word death on camera. You and your co-workers exchange looks. Someone whispers, "I bet they'll call it a safety incident again." Someone else mutters, "If they ask for interviews, I'm going on break forever." By mid-morning, the first wave of reporters trickles inside. Clipboards, badges, polite smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. They're not here for screws or drywall anchors. They're hunting sound bites. "Do you work here?" one of them asks you, though the apron and name tag make the question unnecessary. You tell them you're not authorized to comment. You've heard that phrase enough times in HR meetings to know it's your shield. The reporter presses gently. "Off the record, then." You shake your head. "Try the manager," you say, pointing toward aisle 7, where your boss is now pretending to care deeply about the shovel display. You watch as she corners him anyway, the camera light flicking on like an interrogation lamp. When the story airs that night, you can't help but watch. The footage looks cinematic, all slow-motion shots and somber piano music. The anchor's voice is calm and serious. A small-town hardware store at the centre of a growing national concern. They blur the store name just enough to maintain journalistic integrity, but anyone within a 50-mile radius knows exactly where it is. They include a few seconds of security footage, not the footage, but generic shots of the paint aisle, the cans glimmering like relics of something dangerous and holy. Then come the interviews. A customer saying you just don't expect that kind of thing here, a local safety expert recommending tighter regulations, and a spokesperson from corporate who somehow manages to sound both compassionate and soulless. "Our thoughts are with everyone affected," she says, reading from a teleprompter. By the next morning, the ripple effect has begun. Random strangers stop by just to look. Some whisper prayers under their breath. Others treat it like a tourist attraction. You catch one man taking a selfie in front of the paint aisle. He tags it on social media. #PrayForOurTown. Corporate responds with an email titled "Managing Media Presence and Maintaining Professionalism." It reminds everyone not to engage with reporters and to focus on the customer experience. You laugh out loud when you read it, because the customers now treat you like part of the exhibit, a living prop in a story about tragedy. By the end of the week, the news cycle moves on. Another town, another headline, another isolated incident. The vans leave, the cameras vanish, and the store returns to its usual quiet hum. But something stays behind, a lingering awareness that, for a few brief days, the world noticed your little corner of reality, not because it mattered, but because it made good television. And as you restock the shelves once more, surrounded by the soft buzz of fluorescent light, you realize the cameras may have left, but the feeling of being watched never really does. After the news story, the phone starts ringing more. Some callers claim to have inside information. Others swear there's a secret underground paint ring run by teens in ski masks. Someone emails corporate accusing the store of chemical mind control. The manager has to print out each message for record keeping. You stack them in a drawer labelled public feedback, a paper monument to how weird the internet can get. You start to wonder if the line between caution and paranoia has dissolved entirely, like paint thinner on a bad surface. It begins the day after the story airs. The phone rings before you've even turned the lights on, and it doesn't stop. At first, you think it's customers. People asking about refunds, safety, store hours. But these aren't customers. These are the concerned public. The first caller introduces herself as a citizen investigator. She insists the paint fumes are part of a government experiment. They're aerosolizing control frequencies, she says. You've got to wear copper mesh hats, not aluminum. That's what they want you to use. You thank her for the tip and hang up. She calls back 5 minutes later to clarify that the mesh must be grounded. By noon, the inbox is full of messages with subject lines like, "Urgent," "You're in danger," and aisle 14, "Truth exposed." Some are written in all caps, some in Comic Sans, and one is just a blurry photo of a can of primer labelled "The Real Threat." Corporate's policy is clear. Every email must be documented and filed. So you print them out, 3-hole punch them, and slide them neatly into the growing binder of collective madness. Then come the voicemails, dozens of them. A man whispering about toxic nanobots. A woman sobbing that her cat won't stop staring at the wall since she painted her kitchen. A self-proclaimed former chemist who insists he knows what's really inside the paint. Something about aerosolized serotonin disruptors and vibrational conditioning. You've started to recognize voices now. They call back weekly, each time with new revelations and worse audio quality. The local Facebook groups don't help. Someone posts a picture of your store with the caption, "Something sinister here." Within hours, the comment section fills with accusations, theories, and one very confident man explaining that the fumes are a cover for 5G radiation tests. You scroll through it on your break, eating your vending machine chips in silence, wondering when human imagination became this combustible. Corporate's response is to stay professional. The manager reads the memo out loud at the morning meeting, voice trembling slightly. "We appreciate the community's passion," it says, "and encourage our employees to redirect all inquiries to official company channels." The official company channel, as it turns out, is an email address that automatically replies with, "Thank you for your feedback." You try to laugh about it with your co-workers, but even the jokes start sounding uneasy. "Maybe they're right," Jen says one night, half smiling. "Maybe we are in the middle of a mind control experiment. Ours just comes with a paycheck." No one disagrees. Still, some part of you understands where the paranoia comes from. When you've lived through what this store has seen, the smells, the sirens, the silences, it's easy to believe in unseen forces. Maybe it's not the government or chemtrails or teenage paint cartels. Maybe it's just something simpler, something sadder. People trying to make sense of chaos. You finish your shift and lock the drawer filled with printed emails and notes. The label public feedback stares back at you like a joke written by the universe itself. You imagine archaeologists finding it one day, a dusty archive of 21st century confusion, and realizing that, for a while, the world thought your paint aisle was the center of a global conspiracy. And in a way, maybe it was. So tonight, as you lie there under clean sheets, breathing actual air that isn't 30% solvent, think about the strange, quiet heroism of surviving a modern hardware store. You clocked in under buzzing lights, stood guard over a rainbow of chemical temptations, and made it through shifts that smelled like regret and citrus cleaner. You dealt with the huffers, the hopefuls, the weekend warriors with more ambition than skill, and you did it all while pretending not to have a splitting headache from industrial fresh linen. You learned that danger doesn't always wear armour or carry a sword. Sometimes it comes in 12-ounce cans with ergonomic nozzles and names like Arctic Chrome. You watched people chase euphoria in the most absurd way possible, one that corporate memos and common sense couldn't fix. You tried to help, to warn, to clean up, to keep the shelves full while the world around you quietly came undone in aisle 14. But you also saw the good stuff. Co-workers who shared coffee and dark jokes. Customers who just wanted to make their kitchen look less sad. Kids who still picked up brushes instead of cans. You saw resilience, the small, tired kind that keeps showing up for minimum wage and still finds a way to laugh. So as you drift off tonight, wrapped in safety and warmth, maybe whisper a thank you to clean air, to lungs that work properly, to the quiet heroes of retail who hold civilization together with nothing but barcode scanners and sarcasm. History is full of people surviving ridiculous odds, and somehow, even in an aisle that smells like paint thinner, that pattern continues. Humanity stumbles, fumbles, and occasionally faceplants, but it keeps trying, so close your eyes. Let the hum of your fan replace the fluorescent buzz. Let the world fade to quiet. You've survived another day in a story that's equal parts tragic, funny, and deeply human. And for now, that's enough.